On behalf of the Toronto Association for Democracy in China, I wish to thank the committee for this series of hearings on the situation in Hong Kong. For too long, we believed that China will abide by international rules of engagement and diplomatic civility, as well as the respect for the fundamental concepts of rule of law. This illusion has now been shattered by the arbitrary arrest of the two Michaels and the retroactive application of the national security law in Hong Kong. For this presentation, we will focus on two areas that we, as Canadians, can undertake. First, how to counter China's interventions and interference and protect our Canadian interests and values. Second, what specific programs Canada should adopt to support those in Hong Kong who try to leave. I will address the first, and my colleague Avvy will address the second issue. Since Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, China has made a concerted effort to mask its human rights abuses and to present a positive image to advance its global ambition. It has set up hundreds of proxy associations in Canada, many of them empty shells, to influence and interfere in Canadian political, social, and cultural spheres, and to gain access and to influence our elected officials. Here are 4 examples of this united front strategy that Chinese consulates and their proxies have carried out. They have held community press conferences to support the release of Meng Wanzhou and, more clumsily, hire non-ethnic Chinese actors to demonstrate in order to show the mainstream support for their cause. They have compelled Chinese international students to demonstrate against pro-Hong Kong rallies by threatening to withhold their government scholarship or harming their families back home if they don't comply. They cultivated the mayor of a rural British Columbia community for years so that his quote praising China's response on COVID-19 is used on Twitter to burnish China's virus-fighting narrative. And finally, they introduced the Confucius Institute, which ceases as deemed to be a quasi-spying agency, into an Ontario school board by hosting a reception for his chair at Beijing's Great Hall of the People, a venue normally reserved for heads of state. And this wholesale and ongoing influence in our civil society has continued for 30 years as part of China's effort to influence our policies and politics. To dampen or to put a stop on this effort, we should be vigilant against cyber attacks and theft of intellectual property from our corporations and research institutions. 2, provide critical assessment of China's takeover of our corporations in strategic industries such as mining and energy resources, as well as institutions vital to our national security, such as infrastructure and nursing homes. 3, support a national hotline as proposed by Amnesty International to coordinate and to encourage the reporting of China's harassment and intimidation of our own citizens. 4, establish a more stringent process to ensure transparency among current and former elected officials in their relationships with China in order to mitigate undue foreign influence in our internal affairs. 5, coordinate with like-minded allies and join the call for a UN Special Rapporteur on Hong Kong. 6, apply the Magnitsky Act to sanction officials from Hong Kong and China responsible for human rights violations. Finally, this was not in my original script, but I want to share with you a news report that just came in yesterday about the recent Global Affairs contract to award a Chinese company to install and maintain X-ray scanners in our embassies around the world. Not only did 2 other Canadian companies offer lower bids, but that the Chinese company, Nuntech, was slapped with a 5-year tariff by the EU for alleged dumping and engaging in questionable practices. And recently, the company has been caught setting up a honey trap to scheme a Taiwanese official into purchasing these machines. I will now yield my time to my colleague, Avvy Go.
Thank you, Cheuk, and thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for having us this afternoon. As mentioned before, apart from being a director of TADC, I'm also a lawyer and the clinic director of the Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic, where we provide free legal services to low-income clients, including many refugees from China. But as we speak, the crackdown on pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong is happening right before our eyes. The arrest of Jimmy Lai confirms that no amount of fame and fortune can protect anyone who dares speak out against China's dictatorial regime. But with over 300,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong and several hundreds of thousands more so Canadians of Hong Kong origin living in Canada, the Canadian government not only have a moral duty to act, but a legal obligation to protect our citizens and their close family members in Hong Kong. Since the Second World War, there have been many examples of Canada granting status to large groups of people fleeing political persecution and civil war. And while the flame of democracy is being suppressed, Hong Kong is burning. And although we may not be able to extinguish the raging fire, we must do what we can to contain its damage and save as many lives as possible. So to that end, we're calling on Canada to take the following actions. First, Canada should expedite family sponsorship applications by Canadians for their families in Hong Kong, including spousal sponsorship as well as sponsorship for parents and grandparents. And Canada should also expand the family class program to facilitate reunification of Canadians with other family members in Hong Kong. Second, as soon as the travel ban is lifted, Canada should issue more temporary resident permits or work visas to Hong Kongers, as well as student visas to young people who want to continue to pursue the study in a safe environment. Third, we should create a special program to grant permanent resident status to the Hong Kong activists involved in the pro-democracy movement and who are already in Canada. Similar to the special program created for the thousands of Chinese nationals present in Canada after the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. And finally, for those activists who have been arrested or are in imminent danger of arrest, we should direct the Canadian consulate in Hong Kong to issue temporary resident as well as travel document to facilitate their safe and immediate exit from Hong Kong should they choose to leave. Upon their arrival in Canada, we should provide them with protected person status or permanent resident status. Hong Kong people have stood up against the powerful authoritarian regime to safeguard the core values of democracy and freedom of expression. It's incumbent upon all of us as Canadians to provide our meaningful support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwan and Ms. Go. Excuse me.